Well, good morning and welcome to the latest evidence session for the Democracy Commission. Paul, I'll just give you some background of where we are. Yeah. I chair a members' commission here in Kirklees, which is a very small, all-party body which has been looking at the role of the elected member and how it might well change over the next 5-10 years. And we realised that from our discussions there were much bigger questions coming out that needed to be answered, which therefore formed the basis of the Democracy Commission. It's again all party. It's got an independent chair, Andy Mycock from University, whose apologies I tender this morning because Andy's had to go down to London. Over the summer we've held a number of sessions with residents throughout Kirklees and students at the university, getting their views on our main lines of inquiry. Then we've moved into a stage where, like today, we're getting the opinions of experts in their own field. We will then be consulting the political groups on the council and then coming together to put some draft recommendations together. In addition, some of our members have been visiting other councils who have been through some of the experiences we're considering. Today they're down in Bassetlaw. So I'm interested this morning really to cover the role that technology, internet, etc., could play, both in the work the council does, but also in the role of elected members. And maybe you could open by letting us have your views. Our engagement with the public illustrates to us that many feel there aren't enough opportunities for them to interact with the council or with councillors, either in the decision-making process or really at any time other than when we're knocking on the door asking for their vote. Presumably that can be resolved. The question is how.
$64 million question.
Well, we like to give the easy ones to begin with.
Yeah. I'd just like to say how pleased I am that you're doing this. I think it's a fantastic initiative. When I was thinking about coming up here, I sort of did a little bit of reading up, and I came across some interesting research, because presumably what you're about here is improving the democratic legitimacy of not only councillors but the local institution. I mean, that's a huge pressing task of our time, the democratic deficit. Not enough people vote, certainly in local elections, and not enough people participate or feel they can participate. So there was this recent research done that looked at the citizenship survey, which is a DCLG initiative. I'm not sure whether it's still going, but this was in 2010. Very robust quantitative study of a large representative sample of how citizens across England and Wales participate. And what the author of this study found two sort of strands to democratic legitimacy. One is it's related to trustworthiness of the local government institution, and two, it's a sense of whether people see the procedures as being fair, whether they can see any political efficacy, whether they can see any point in their endeavour. But what they found, which I think probably you know instinctively, but this is sort of empirical evidence, is that people who report greater participation in a range of local public decision-making activities report a greater sense of influence in government decision-making and allocate stronger importance to the values of democratic process. So, if you can improve participation, you do get that knock-on effect. And this is regardless of outcome. So as long as people are engaged, and it's a genuine sense of engagement, and they can see the routes, it's an open and transparent procedure, they continue to sort of value that democratic process. But the other key thing for me, and this I think is probably where I'm going to sort of be emphasising my contribution, is what they also found is that no one size fits all. The study shows that while relationship between participation and legitimacy is universally positive, the strength and shape of this effects varies between regions. The local geography, and culture, and history, and politics is critically important. So, whilst I can go on, will go on to give you some examples of how technology has been used in the local context to improve decision making, it's the local context that matters. It's not going to be possible, I don't think, for you just to sort of buy something that works in one area or in one part of the world and transport it here. There are key explanatory variable, which I think is the kind of local context. It's the local environment, it's the local political economy, it's how your institution is designed, how you the procedures you have for making policy, which are critical, I think.
How important is it to make sure that it's a two-way street? Because, well, we're remarkably good at consulting.
Yeah.
We're terrible at going back to the people we've consulted, telling them the results of that consultation and the end result of the process.
Yes, I think that's very important, because once again, it's the evidence shows that while people are not, they won't be put off if they experience an adverse outcome. They want to know what the outcome is, and they want to know how that's been decided. And I think one of the problems of local government throughout the ages is it's been a very elite model of decision making. It's primarily policy has been determined by senior politicians collaborating with senior officers and perhaps the social elite, if you like, of the local constituents, and the people who haven't been involved in this, which is presumably the point of your commission here, are other relevant stakeholders, citizens, maybe even frontline workers of your own council, so-called street-level bureaucrats who at the sharp end of delivering services and will probably have a huge amount of valuable information to feed back into it. So all that is, I think, disrupting that elite model, opening it up, is a real challenge for local government. But I think there are signs, and obviously this commission is a very positive sign of that there's now a political willingness to begin to try and change that. So I guess what role technology can play.
Well, maybe this bit possibly leads into that, because our engagement has also shown that there's a need for more direct public and community involvement in the decision-making process. First of all, what are your views on that conclusion? But probably most importantly, that being the case, how do we encourage or facilitate the public in getting that more direct involvement?
Right. I think one of the sort of things you're looking at is this tension, isn't it, between the role of a councillor as a representative of their ward, and then having to sort of be involved in sort of decision making at a more aggregate geographical level, and the more participatory thrust of involving ordinary citizens. My view on this, and it's a very old view, and there's a lot of empirical evidence to support it, I think, is that you have to sort of start to try and build up civil society. Essentially, you have to go back to involving the organisations that make up civil society, because those are the key participative conduits, if you like, into civil society. So we're talking about cultural organisations, we're talking about religious organisations, we're talking about trades unions. And the evidence is, and this goes back to sort of the 19th century when Alexis de Tocqueville was touring North America and observed democracy in action, and he said sort of this: the health of democracy depends upon local people collectively taking local decisions to solve local problems, and that's a huge sort of civic learning process. So how can that be translated? And I suppose more recently there's this concept of associative democracy, and Robert Putnam, in his thesis on social capital, described the benefits of people organising together. So, I mean, and there's nothing new about this, is there? I mean, you as a councillor, I'm sure, will work with lots of organisations, but how can you strengthen those? How can you begin to strengthen those? And then look, what I think historically we've done badly in this country is look at how these organisations work together, the links between them. Because what we've historically been bad at doing is building this so-called bridging capital between organisations. And maybe that's the role for councillors and local government in terms of building that civic society. So that's another sort of important sort of local democracy sounding board.
Do you foresee that as the way the role of a local council is going to develop, becoming more a facilitator than?
I think that's my view of local government is that we're at a very kind of interesting time of change, and you can see that in national politics, the Brexit decision, the convulsions in social democracy, you know, with the Labour Party in Europe. Things are changing quite a lot. Where they're going to go, it's not quite clear yet. And there's an old quote that I'm overusing at the moment by an Italian communist of the early 20th century, Antonio Gramsci, where he said, "The old order is dying, the new is not yet born, and we're living in times of interregnum where strange morbidities will occur." And I think that's where we are. You know, things have to be tried out. And I think what's happened in local government is the local sort of model of public administration that was dominant for so long, the new public management model, has fallen into disrepute. Likewise, the prevailing in the wider political economy, there's increasing levels of doubt and frustration over the facility of the neoliberal economic model to deliver benefits to enough people. And so there's a requirement to start doing things differently, I think, and innovate. Obviously it's hard, local government's been racked by austerity, but there are different theories and practices coming out. There's a very interesting idea around new public governance and how councils might promote public value more, not in the old sort of matrix kind of way, but in a way sort of going back to the idea of the public service ethos, where public value is actually seen as something which gives long-lasting civic legacy. And to get that, importantly, to get that public value, you have to collaborate more with service users. It's about utilising techniques of co-production, co-design, to try and sort of involve people at a very basic level in the services they're getting.
Doesn't a lot already happen, and it's happened for quite a long time? Because if you think the number of unsung carers, and if they just went on strike tomorrow, then local authorities, adult services just wouldn't be able to cope.
No, absolutely not. They'd fall down. I think what's what's not happened, I think that's right. I think at a very sort of frontline level that does happen, and there's an awful lot of dedicated staff who are trying their best despite the local government institution, though, because I think that's the key here, and I think that's key in terms of the councillor's role. It's about trying to redesign the local government institution to actually best take advantage of this changing circumstances and best embrace new ideas. So instead of working against the institution, how can the institution enable those staff and those councillors to do their job better? And I think that's the same when we come to looking at technology.
And by institution, we're then talking about the vital role that the councillor is going to have to play in creating that atmosphere as an enabler.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned local. How local is local?
Well, I mean, that's that's interesting, isn't it? Obviously, the advantage of new technologies local can be in your bedroom if you want. It can be that local. I mean, I think again, it really depends upon what works in a particular environment. I mean, there's been lots of past examples going back from my time in local government, really, where there was decentralisation to local neighbourhood committees, etc., etc. Then there was that brought back in, and it was centralised again. So maybe it's time to revisit those lessons, but in a new model with a new type of prevailing public value ethos in the local government institution.
You see, we are revisiting those concepts to the Commission, looking at whether we should be recommending some form of devolution downwards, be extending the town and parish councils or area committees or whatever. I mean, we've tried as a council to do that. All we've done is generated little Kirklees councils, but on a local level, which doesn't work.
No. Do you know why it's not worked?
Because they're not. I personally, because I'm learning through this process, that they haven't been. It's been one size fits all. They haven't been designed to suit the local community that they're, and they've been based on areas that again have just been drawn up as matters of convenience. Well, we've got 5 parliamentary constituencies in Kirklees. Let's have one to each constituency. Yeah. Well, you can go a lot lower than that. Yeah. I mean, my own ward, for example, you could split that in half and have 2 separate identities.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you need to perhaps rethink what makes sense culturally, as well as sort of arbitrary, politically drawn boundaries, really.
But the research we've done has illustrated that people have a great sense of local identity, and particularly somewhere in like Kirklees, which was just generated out of nothing in the 1970s anyhow. Somebody drew a line on a map. Never thought of what was within that line. Now, what we have also found is that sense of identity is reduced the younger people get, because they've never known a world where Kirklees didn't exist. So they're quite happy to say to people when you go on holiday, where do you come from? They'll say Kirklees, as opposed to Huddersfield or Dewsbury or Batley. And they're the ones that we're keen to engage more in the process. They're the ones that presumably are leading the way when it comes to all the social technology.
Well, quite, yeah. I mean, it's my views on technology are, I mean, the debate's moved on from this idea that you simply can plant 1,000 mobile phones and democracy will bloom. And it used to be very polarised between that sort of very optimistic view and the kind of very pessimistic view where technology was going to usher in a sort of Big Brother dystopia. And I think now what sort of where the debate is, and I think where and I probably agree with it, is that the political economy of the web, of the internet, is not that much different from the political economy outside it, really. There's vested economic interests that can determine what information gets more prominence, what information you get access to, but also there's the technology does allow ordinary people, ordinary citizens, to get their voice heard every now and then above those that traditionally dominate that political discourse. And my view is that local government should be sort of operating in that political tension. They should be acting as an advocate of ordinary people.
You're looking for trouble.
They should be acting to ensure that their voice does get heard more and more in the local political economy. Because I think by doing that, I mean, I'm not saying it's an easy role to play, because obviously there are important local economic interests, national that will also have to be parlayed. But if we can get to a point where those voices are heard more, then you start to build up a greater sense of trust, I think, really. And it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but that's, there is a potential for the technology to enable you to do that, I think.
Is there a certain element of chicken and egg in it, though? Because if we go back to something you said at the start, that if people can see a result for their efforts, then they're going to be more satisfied with the system. But you've got to get them to a position where they naturally have the ability to see those results. And
Quite.
Some people tell us that, it's for the council to do. It's the councillor's job. But, how do you persuade them to get engaged?
It's it's very. I think you've got to at a small level work around sort of projects that they're interested in and try and give them a sense that they can really influence the outcome of this particular service design. I was very surprised. I worked on a project recently which was trying to work with elderly people to develop a digital application to enable them to have greater independent living. I think we were just looking at internet shopping to begin with. And we hired this local SME and we gave them a brief that they had to co-design this application with these elderly people who by and large hadn't used any technology. They were 65 plus, they weren't digital natives. And I was astonished by the responses of these people, actually. And these weren't particularly. What was interesting about it is that these people were well looked after. Really, they lived largely in very comfortable residential homes, because that's where we did the work. So materially, they didn't really want for much. But what was missing in their lives was a sense of being part of society, being part of being a citizen. One elderly woman I said, she said, it's astonishing. We've given suggestions to these people and they've listened to us and they've actually changed the design. So it's astonishing being listened to. She said that when you get to my age, you're invisible largely, and being involved in this process has made me feel human again. And I just thought, well, that's remarkable, isn't it? Just from a very small little project, doing something which was important, actually going to where the people are, you can get that kind of reaction, really. The big problem, of course, is how you can do that at a larger scale, or how you can scale it out, I suppose, really. Because this was a small project involving 50 elderly service users. Obviously, for that to be effective, you want to do that on much larger groups of people. But it was certainly something that I felt could reap benefits. But how do you do that in the current cash-strapped circumstances that local governments find themselves in?
Well, it was an interesting reaction. When you get onto the sort of level we're talking about, the kind of decisions that you're making in place, councils are making, then obviously it's a matter of choices as well, isn't it? And particularly, as you say, we're cash strapped, so one thing's going to affect another thing.
Yeah.
How do we best educate the public so that they can appreciate the choices that have to be, the effects of the decision, the choices that have to be made? Because it's very easy for them to come in with their one issue and push for it.
How can we best educate the public? It's a huge question, isn't it? I mean, obviously they need good, sensible information. And in an ideal situation, you'd have a very, very vital and robust public sphere where they would have access to expert opinion that would be able to be a discursant in the sort of dissemination of this information. They'll be able to come back and ask questions of that and take sensible decisions. I mean, I've seen it work in certain settings, very, very resource intensive, but it worked. And I think all I can say in terms of the context of Kirklees is you have to try and build up. The only way, first of all, I think it's again going back to this idea of institutional design, getting all your information. Because I think one of the problems, certainly where I live, that councillors have is, like a lot of citizens, is getting the right information at the right time from the local council. Because it's been designed, silo-driven, it's not designed in a way to access the kind of information that people want. So that's a problem. So which is why I'm saying that one of the key variables is how you design your institution. So there's getting all that information out. Then if you can build up good networks within civil society, within all these sort of organisations that I'm sure you already work with, and a trusted relationship that you can pass them good information and have sensible discussions there. The local press, that's always a bit of a tricky one. Non-existent here yet. Radio stations, etc. Relationships there, and social media. But again, the big problem from my experience and research I've done, when councils try to participate in social media forums, they come up against, they're doing so despite the local government institution. They get asked questions on social media forums as what's happening when you stop the number 82 bus? Where else? What's going to be its place? And if they don't have that information to their fingertips and to be able to answer it within a certain time, that participation has been massively devalued. Because what happens is that person who's quizzed them thinks that the council is hiding something because they've not told them that information. So the trust relationship starts to deteriorate. So if you are going to participate in these forums, you've got to really kind of make sure you have all the right information at your fingertips.
Is that because the public's expectations are artificially too high?
Possibly, but also I think it's also about, it goes back, which I think has always been true since I've known local government, is that the public just see the council. They don't see environmental services or or social services or childcare. They just see the council, and you are a representative of the council. Therefore, you should know what's happening. And why don't you know? What are you hiding from me? And so I don't think it's there obviously is some need to sort of perhaps. But what are you going to say? This is the mess we're in. But it kind of, if you were going to design local government,
you wouldn't start from where we are now.
No, because it's grown up in a way that's far from ideal. As people say, a Victorian industrial institution trying to get by in a very post-industrial world.
Have you got any views on how we can enhance the representative role whilst encouraging or facilitating wider participation? I mean, we're moving on now to the participatory democracy.
Not really. I don't think I've got much to add other than what I've already been actually going through. Perhaps what I've already said. Really, I think councillors have to be the glue that tries and sort of sticks the networks of local organisations together. And I think if they can start to sort of build that civic society up in a way, then I think that will.
Is there not a difference though between councillors enabling things to happen on their patch by bringing together community groups, community interests, through the councils supporting them to do things which they couldn't necessarily be done through the council because they have access to funding that the council couldn't get. The difference between that and harnessing the enthusiasm of citizens who just want to push, say, just one separate agenda.
Yeah, there can be a tension there, but that's got to be played out, hasn't it? I mean, I think sort of the only way that tension can be addressed is by being as open as possible.
But they're both legitimate.
Yes.
How do we encourage and facilitate that one issue person, get them involved, and hopefully through that experience,
keep them involved
and widen their spheres of ambition.
Giving them as much support as possible, obviously not discouraging them, giving them as much information as they want, trying to be as open as possible, encouraging them to join with other individuals, because obviously there's what gets things done is small groups of committed citizens, isn't it? That's the only thing that's ever changed the world, I think, really. So if you can sort of encourage that process, then I think that's a good job. I mean, it's a political act, isn't it? I guess, really.
And is that the role of the councillor or the council? Because if it's the latter, there's going to be further tensions because the citizens' gripe is probably with the council, and they probably see the citizens as the one who's the pain.
Yeah. I mean, yes, but I think at the end of the day, the councillor's job is to be the advocate of the citizen. And I think if they're going back into the council, and then they've got to come back and try and do their best for the citizen. But you know, like I said at the beginning, if you're as open as possible about the procedure for getting things done, and it seemed to be fair, then most people will, I think, say, okay, you've tried the best. There's other explanations that maybe we have to address in a different manner.
How can we make a virtue of the opportunities that are presented to councillors to buy new mobile technology, social media, to help them do their job better? In other words, how do we get the Luddites out of the system?
There's been a lot of work over that, I think, over the last 10 years. I mean, I think individual councillors are perhaps getting better at using new technology. Certainly than they were. I still think that the problem is that local government as a whole isn't. You know, that's and I think again, you know, I can't stress that this is a real obstacle to how councillors engage with the wider community. I mean, you've got this dual role, obviously, representing the citizens and sitting on the council, and you will be seen as part of the council by the citizens. But if you're working against the local government institution in terms of, you can be as mobile savvy as you like, but if you can't get the right information at the right time.
So it's merely a tool. It just means that if you've got your smartphone with you, then you can, rather than wait till you get back to an office base and go on the computer to get the information, you can actually sit on site in your car and go Google it and get it on your phone.
Yeah, but it's only any use if you can get the right information on it.
Yes.
If you can't, then you know then.
But it's no different. It's no panacea to everything. It's just a tool. It's there.
That's my opinion. I mean, I think it has certain other sort of affordances. I mean, I think it's true in terms of, you know, socially and economically it changes perhaps how we behave, and gives us more opportunity to do things. But ultimately, from a political perspective, and you know, that there's evidence that it's a great tool for organising sort of, you know, social movements and political protest, etc. It's fantastic. But in day-to-day sort of civic life, I mean, if you can't have access to the right information that citizen needs at that time, then I think that's a problem for you, sort of doing your role to the best of your ability and maintaining that sort of trusted relationship, or developing that trusted relationship with residents and groups of residents.
Do people give too much set too high a store by the new technology? I mean, you know, it's an answer to everything, whereas, I mean, you're stressing the fact that it's the information that matters.
I think it's the information that matters, and it's who controls the information.
But it's always been thus.
It's always been thus. It's always been thus. The sort of the development of new technologies does open up new opportunities for disrupting and subverting those power bases. But ultimately, it's still, you know, if you want to look at, like I said before, it's the local political economy, it's how the local government institution chooses to mediate those tensions between residents and other local vested interests. And it's no different to engaging or being active online.
So people are setting far too much store on. It's not the answer to the world's problem.
Absolutely not. No, it's a fantastic. It's probably the most powerful technology we've invented. It's fantastic, but we can choose how to use it. We need to choose how to use it. And like I said before at the beginning, context is really important. Local context, how it's used, how people choose to take on or promote local democracy is trying to get to a situation where you can level the playing field, if you like, for local residents, so that their voices can get heard over and above those that have traditionally dominated that debate.
One way that people want to increasingly use it as a tool is when it comes to voting.
Yeah.
Have you got any views on?
I've not got any strong views. I've not really seen much. I've not looked into sort of voting and there's the experiments in the early part of this century with use of technology, as far as I remember, didn't work. But that was before the advent of social media. I think there's, in terms of voter turnout, there's other stronger explanatory variables than technology. It's about sort of peer pressure and and how sort of members of your household, whether they vote or not, or all those kind of things. I mean, what technology definitely does is lower the cost of participating. It makes it you can be a slacktivist, which I'm all in favour of. It's very easy to sign a petition, and that's fantastic. It's easier to give your opinion, and that's important, I think. But in terms of ongoing participation, I think that's another step.
So again, is it a myth then that it's going to bring a whole new generation into political activity?
No, I don't think it's a myth. No, I don't think it's a myth. It's a very, very useful tool. So we can see what's happened in the Labour Party with the extraordinary rise of Jeremy Corbyn, that seems to have radicalised, tens of thousands of young people, who that is not. They've not been radicalised because of the technology. They've used the technology very well to chat and discuss and share ideas, but fundamentally it's about ideology. It's about ideas that have excited and motivated people to get involved. And that takes me back to what I was saying at the beginning about institutional values and this idea of public value, being a kind of a different idea, a different ideology of a way of administering public services around collaborating. And if that can be promoted, and if that can be, which I think, as far as I know, Kirklees is trying to do that, sort of open itself up and promote itself as a different beast. And I think if you can, come out in sort of, tooth and claw around that idea, then it may work. Because I think ideas are important, and the technology just helps to disseminate more.
And presumably means that from the privacy of your bedroom with the technology, then you've got a much wider audience, so you've basically got an electronic town hall meeting with potentially tens, hundreds of thousands of people attending. So is that an ideal tool then for the political parties to harness for electoral purposes?
Yeah, well, it's being done, isn't it? Sort of Barack Obama in his first presidential campaign in 2008 famously used technology in that. He wasn't the first, but he was most publicised. But what it actually interestingly, what he did, he used very cleverly social media technology to disseminate his idea. You know, what was his slogan? Change or something about? Can't remember anymore. But a lot of the technology was just about identifying people to go and talk to people face to face, or to ring people up and have a conversation with about it. That was about putting people sort of in that very sort of effective, sort of direct relationship. So there are kind of more contemporary examples, which I mentioned at the beginning, that I can give you specific examples of how technology has been used in other parts of the world. There's one in Reykjavik, Iceland, at the moment, called Better Reykjavik. I don't know whether you've come across this. I don't know that much about it, but they allege they're using technology to engage 70,000 residents out of 120,000 residents in policy making. Now, I think this needs to be investigated. I don't know, but it's extraordinary. But there will be a context here. If you think about what Iceland's been through, political convulsions since the financial crash. You know, it's thrown all its political leaders. I don't know, it's thrown some of them in jail. I think, or jailed its bankers, and very, very radical.
Kept some of our money.
Yeah. And so there'll be a context there, but that's interesting. There's another one in Mexico City where they're now using technology to crowdsource a new constitution, which sounds remarkable to me, but that would be worth investigating as well, having a look at how they're doing that. But again, what I would urge is look at the context, why that's happening, why it's got such traction there. Somebody mentioned something called Space Hive in London to me, which I'm not sure what that is, but evidently that's another sort of project that's engaging citizens in local policy making. So there's a number of good examples, but which I think are there to be learned from, and see whether they can be applied usefully in these areas. But like I said before, no one size will fit all.
Will there be a reluctance from the political elite to transfer power down, that enable more people to? Or has there been any evidence of resistance?
They usually don't like giving up power, do they? But where am I thinking of now? Obviously, in Iceland, they had no choice. They had to go. They were just by sort of popular dissent. Here, I think there is. It's difficult to say, isn't it? I mean, there's obviously the policy innovation now around devolution and directly elected mayors, which is trying to break up and make decision making directly accountable, or a figure that can be directly accountable. Part of the problem in local government, I think, is the prominence of party politics. That a lot of decision making is taken informally outside of committee meetings through the party political system, and it's hard to see at the moment how that can change. It might do. Again, sort of Labour Party is interesting if there is a sort of internal revolution in the Labour Party, all these new members come in with new ideas, then maybe that could start to open up. I mean, before, what's also interesting about what's happening in the Labour Party, I think, is before that happened, you would have said that political parties were in a state of terminal decline. And that was the way things were going. So that's, I think, interesting. Again, I think perhaps the power of ideas. But no, I mean, I think political elites will give up power if they're forced to, if they see enough evidence, if there's enough people who make them change their ways.
It just strikes me that it's easier to get people to change their ways if you're sort of 500,000 people marching on Downing Street with clubs in your hands and 500,000 people sitting at home with your mobile phone sending text messages.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a mixture of both, isn't it? I mean, most sort of, I think it's not my area really, but the bits that I've read on things like, the sort of the Arab Spring, for example, where we saw lots of revolutions. Sadly, most of them crushed now, but technology played a key part in mobilising people for that. They were sort of protesting in very authoritarian conditions, but they used social media to spread the message to say, look, we're meeting here, let's all march together. So it's that kind of, and similarly in student protests, the Occupy movement, things like that, technology has been used very sort of skillfully by activists to more effectively organise their protests.
The allegation is that Millwall fans use it when they're going out on the road.
Of course, that's sort of maybe that's not the model you want to follow.
Are there any other messages or pieces of advice that you would you consider we should hear?
No, I mean, I think sort of I think I've said my piece really. I hope it's been useful. I mean, I think what you're doing is as I said, a fantastic initiative, and I hope it sort of bears fruit. I wish you well.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your views and for your time. Much appreciated. Where we go from here is that by the end of this month or beginning of next, we'll have concluded these evidence gathering sessions. We're taking it through, obviously, the political groups on the council to get their opinions on key lines of inquiry. And then the enviable task of sitting down and sifting through everything we've gathered over the last few weeks will begin, and we'll come out with a draft report and recommendations, which, because we want this to be a two-way street, going back to the it's all right consulting, but if you don't tell people what the results of consulting, we will be distributed to everybody who's contributed, including yourself, for two reasons. One, to make sure that we've interpreted what you've said to your satisfaction, and also really to get your views and feedback on recommendations. Once we've done that, it'll be going to our full council for a decision.
Okay.
Beginning of next year. Fabulous. And now we'll be distributing it to all and sundry who's expressed an interest in the report, and selling the Hollywood rights by the middle of the year, and the film will start in about 12 months' time.
Good luck with that.
But again, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for listening.
Okay. We'll just give it 10 seconds.